It's been a long time coming, nearly 30 years after. The Ninja Falcon Megazord, which is what Tommy calls it in the movie, so I'm now adjusting how I refer to it, is a variant of the series Ninja Mega Falcon Zord that's never been available before as an actual product. Now, with the rise of 3D printing and the lull of anything Power Rangers happening through Hasbro, I decided it was the right time to venture into this fan-made model, mostly for myself, but also equally for you guys who might be sitting on the fence about this thing to experience it too. So my overall fourth version of this Megazord, though only the first to attempt a movie likeness, what's it like? Does it hold up and, more importantly, hold together? Let's talk about it. Here's some toy history. So way back in 1995, the first sight of the Power Rangers new Ninja Zords came in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie. Based on mecha from Ninja Sentai Kaku Ranger, which mostly used models for their mech battles, the decision was made to follow the newfangled CGI trend and recreate the Zords and Megazord in 99% CGI. I say 99% because there are two shots where Ivan throws the 5-Zord Megazord through a building, and it's obviously done practically with what looks like a toy version of Ninja Megazord, but I can only base that off the silver pins on the frog legs, which aren't on the CGI model. It happens so fast and it's darkened so dim you barely see anything. Regardless, I can appreciate the intrinsic difficulty of being an early 1990s CGI team asked to make a convincing animated version of a robot with 14 legs, 8 arms and 4 wings. It must be difficult to keep consistent, especially if different people were working on different shots. CGI robots just weren't the done thing then. Remember, just 2 years earlier, there were practical animatronics used for Jurassic Park. Yeah, there was truth in that CGI was an up-and-coming technology that would soon have the movie industry in a total chokehold, but this was a big departure from how it was being used to date, and unfortunately the limitations of that show up in the quality of the final version. Now don't get me wrong, I've always thought that it had some weird charm. It does feel like an American interpretation of a Japanese design, with all those American intricacies and quirks that you would expect. So they boxed themselves into a corner design-wise, just like what happened with the next full CGI Megazord in 2017. They cheated the transformation process and proportions quite a lot, resulting in a model that could not or would not translate easily into a toy version. I do wonder how the decision got made that Bandai would produce a toy line for the movie primarily composed of existing models, so their existing figures and the existing Kaku Ranger mecha releases. There was no time for Bandai to deal with something as complicated as the CGI Ninja Megazord. I expect the production house was probably going about as up to the wire of the release date as they could, which is just not what toy companies need. They need about 18 months to go from initial design to shelf. Plus, they still had stock shortages from the phenomenon that was the first and second season of the TV toy line to deal with, and they had the upcoming third series toy line to contend with. So they basically called upon what resources they had with simplifying. We got an intermediate scale Ninja Megazord with separating Falcon Zord, ironically the closest to this in concept, despite being half the height. I was a young thing on my second Power Rangers Christmas in 1995, and yes, we did get that toy back then, alongside the remaining Thunder Zords we still needed at the time, Tiger Zord and Tor. We got the deluxe versions in summer and fall of 1996, boxed back in the TV series packaging, though America had gotten movie packaged variants before that. Then in 2016, as those of you who have been keeping up to date with my Legacy Toyline retrospective series know, we got the Legacy versions of the Falcon Zord and Ninja Megazord, which despite their faults, certainly looked better than the originals. There was also a Super Mini Pla release in 2019 which gave another scale to the transforming side of the series robot. And that's where we've been ever since. 4 attempts, 3 that separated, and yet no one has ever tried to do the movie version. Until now. Fardonne 3D is an online 3D model artist who offers a PLA 3D printed model on his Etsy page, and from what I can tell seems to be the originator that several subsequent sellers have copied the 3D renders from. Fardonne says it took him over a year on and off to finish his design. He certainly knows what he's doing and the audience he's appealing to. The item page for this thing literally says, "Make your dream come true," in all caps and with 3 exclamation marks. It's that enthusiasm that helped convince me to go for this from him. It's not cheap, costing over £300 for the item including shipping. A cheaper unpainted version was available, but realistically I couldn't see myself painting that thing very quickly, and so I went this route instead. Overall, I'm very happy to have a version of something that the lack of existence of has been driving me crazy for years. I won't say since 1995, because as an impressionable youth I genuinely thought if it said Movie Megazord on the box, then that was good enough for me. Though my childhood sketches from 95 implied that I did get that the movie version was different. And gradually over time, with a bit of critical thinking, I've realised what we got and what we didn't get. I had hoped Hasbro would visit this as part of the Zap line. That doesn't seem to be going anywhere anymore, and I don't see Bandai Japan ever touching it given that there's no nostalgia for the Power Rangers movie version over there. So this, right now, was the next best thing. Let's go into the design. First off, putting any sort of model of this thing together is ambitious to begin with, when the thing tends to change between shots in the movie, a limitation of using CGI rather than practical models. For example, for the Falcon Megazord combination, the Falcon was shown to slot its feet into the back of the Megazord, but then later on, when it's flying in space, you see the feet in its normal position as though someone else had worked on that shot using the toy as reference, and didn't really get the memo of what had already been animated. The animation itself was ropey and not ever designed to be interrogated frame by frame in HD like we can do now. The frog has a flat face in most shots and just looks like it's been squeezed into a box, which again, probably limitations of the software at the time. So you must take it all with a grain of salt, or a few grains of salt. Having said that, Fardonne 3D's design does seem to take the most design inspiration from the 3D model version done by, I'm sorry if I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Tsuyoshi Nonaka, first seen at Power Morphicon in 2014. I actually showed these designs in my Zap Megazord wishlist video from early 2023. Fardonne made a few deviations from it for his model. For one, Nonaka used the wolf glove cover, which is wrong, but he had the frog's head to hip proportions right. This thing also gets these iterative design interpretations over the years. I think the biggest help from my perspective was the Shout Factory Blu-ray in 2019, as for the first time we could see the thing in bright high def. We could pause it and really start to spot the design choices made for this thing for the first time. A couple design issues that deviate from the on-screen design, bearing in mind, again, we've never had a proper toy of it. There's 4 headlight-looking circles and an M that should be underneath the bear head. The edges of the upper torso of the Bearzord are also done more like the series edition, with the tips that could be blasters. In the movie, these sections are more rounded, like handlebars or railings or something. The arms look mostly wrong and definitely pull more from the series design, as Nonaka's did too. They have a very different look in the movie. Remember, 2 Zords becoming 2 arms was not an established convention at the time. The Megazords and all the combinations we'd had from the Dino and Thunder Zords were always symmetrical, with the different Zords being the legs. This was the first Megazord to flip it around. The changes of the movie arms were that the ape's hand appeared from inside the Zord, and the wolf Zord head obviously didn't get gloved. It must have been quite a forward-thinking change, as Sentai would do the same for the Wild Force Zords several years later. The top of the arms look more like exaggerated series versions, like the gold circles being raised. In the movie, these look quite different. The connections to the bear are less interesting than the screen version too. There's no mohawk on the top of the Ape Zord, something quite prominent in the movie. The cockpit, which has that gilded window design, is also simplified to just being a gold circle. An imitation of that is the gold symbol from the series version that always looked like an S to me, but I'm sure some Kaku Ranger fans will be able to enlighten me on what it really meant. There's no folded feet visible on the wolf, and it's a lot less silver than it should be too. It can be hard going off the screen version to determine what's going on with the frog, because it seems to change from shot to shot. But one thing I'm fairly certain of is that I don't think the frog has legs either side of the head. I think much more like the series version, it should be where the legs flow down from the head into the legs. The legs also seem a bit thicker and rounder on screen than the more hydraulic Terminator endoskeleton style we have here. I will give them credit though, they've nailed the knees. The Crane Zord becomes the head and looks nearly there. One of the most striking design changes I find is going from being a face with 2 eyes to 5 windows, but it kind of comes across like a visor, which was not uncommon, having already had one on the Dragon Zord Warrior mode, Thunder Megazord, Mega Tiger Zord, and Tor the Shuttle Zord. The shape seems right, the colours chosen in the paint are brilliant. The only thing that looks a bit wrong is actually the Bear Zord again. In the movie it has these 2 silver triangular parts which move and slide in to lock the crane headpiece in place. Here they stay out over the shoulders. However, I can imagine this having been done for articulation reasons perhaps. The Falcon Zord looks to me to be the least changed, though proportionally it seems a little different, especially to Legacy, which had a comically overlarge tail, so it practically reached the ground once connected. Here though, the Falcon does look a bit too high up, like his Zord head shouldn't be higher than the top of the Crane Zord. It reminds me of the last few versions of Dino Megazord we've had, which have been pushing the blasters on the back up and up. Fardonne has said he would one day like to design an uglier version of the Falcon Zord head to match the movie version a bit more. That would be interesting to see, but for now, this is good. I think the wings themselves actually look like the perfect height, so maybe proportionally there's some changes that could be made to keep the wings where they are, but have the head less tall. Overall, the design of the Ninja Falcon Megazord commits to the slightly more humanoid version shown in the movie. It's a really interesting look for a Megazord, and establishes a convention that would be repeated in 2017 of giving up a lot of the Zord's individual mass in order to appear sleeker. Comparing it to the other variants of this though, what are the differences to the originals? So this is a fun one because as a screen accurate movie Megazord, it sits in a category of 1 of 1 so far, apart from that model from the convention years back. But there's been so many Ninja Mega Falcon Zords, so let's compare what we can. As a 3D print, it's impressively crafted with a high number of separate printed pieces. Assembly is relatively simple, and if you're a Ranger fan who's had any version of this previously, everything intuitively goes where you think it should. Obviously though, despite the high piece count, it doesn't transform, which is a shame. I understand why not, as there's the already mentioned limitations of the design itself, but then it's a 3D print, and it would take a much more complex build to get into a position where you could reliably transform and change pieces around without fear of breaking parts off in the process. But wouldn't it be amazing one day? Hopefully it won't take us another 30 years to get there. The feel is different, being made of 3D plat or PLA. It doesn't really feel like toy plastic, it's more like a wood. I know it's not wood, but that's just kind of how 3D printed stuff tends to feel for me. As we've mentioned, it's taller, standing head and shoulders above either previous Bandai Deluxe or Legacy version. We know they are huge compared to the Super Mini Plat, so though I don't own that, I hope this gives you an idea. And of course the intermediate Megazord, which this one does feel like a bit of a spiritual successor to, where there was of course the Megazord playable separating Falcon Zord and a Power Sword as well. Now that was the opposite in terms of articulation, only having it in the arms I believe. The Deluxe gave us an inadvertent little bit more because of transformation reasons, and the Legacy seemed to give us an intentional bit more, including the ability to angle up the crane head as though in flight. And of course the Super Mini Plat kept this going as well. Here there's articulation galore, with ball jointed connections allowing for posing of the hands, arms, elbows, head, torso, legs and feet, plus jointed connections in the knees. So with a lot of careful manipulation, there's a lot you can do here. It's impressive what's possible. What's bad about it? Well, I'll tell you what's really annoying about having a 3D print is that you have to keep reminding yourself that it's a 3D print. You'll be posing the thing and something will fall off or fall out of its port, and it's because it's not technically attached. It happens mostly with the Falcon's back legs, but really any part that you've attached on a peg could fall off it at any moment. One day I looked at it and noticed that the bear's head was missing. It had just fallen off. The solution to this is surely gluing it on, and Fardonne has shared what glue he uses. And his videos you get when you buy the Megazord do show his double-sided tape method, which he recommends using as well. You could attach pretty much all the parts in a more permanent sense. The parts are deep enough to allow for this. But right now, I'm enjoying having the freedom of being able to deconstruct it as needed. It's useful for painting and eventually putting away back in a box perhaps. Ironically, the first thing I did with it was movie accurate. I destroyed the Power Sword. By mistake, I might add. I dropped a piece of the model on it while I was doing the unboxing for Patreon, and it split, right where the hilt meets the blade. I've since glued it back together, but pretty weird coincidence. Also, that's where gold plastic syndrome affected my actual Bandai Deluxe toy version of the Shogun Megazord Saber. So it's almost like a structural weak point. Fardonne does say that damage can be repaired or exchanged. Luckily I didn't need to do that in this circumstance. I bought the upgraded painted version. I do fret that sometimes the paint looks a bit dull. It's really matte beside other proper toy releases, and the film has everything with this overly chromed look, a bit like the silver on the special size release I had. So I partially want to investigate chroming parts like the arms, bare head and stuff like that, but I also don't want to destroy the beautifully neat and accurate work Fardonne 3D has done here already. It's impressive to get paint right, speaking from experience here. It's hard and it's time consuming, so this is much better than I could do. I just wish it was shinier. What's good about it though? Well, Fardonne's item page really bigs up his new version 2 Falconzord screw connection method, and now I understand it. Yeah, it's good. A little annoyingly it can spin around though, so there is a bit of a limitation with it, but overall it's a very clever way to solve what could be, and in the very recent past has been, a major issue. How do you create a connection between these two large pieces with minimal interruption to the design while functioning reliably without risk to the components? Well, you slide a screw into a holder and that seems to be the answer. There was a V1 piece which did come included, and I think what's interesting about that is that it seems to be able to adjust the height of the Falconzord slightly. I'm not able to get the screw connector out and I don't want to mess with a good thing right now, so I'll leave that for others to explore. I think a lot of the copy sellers are currently using the original V1 push piece method. That of course isn't the only screw being used here. There's two more which make for a major design difference in the knees, which use a screw in each to keep taut and take the weight of the thing. It's an interesting variation to the rest of the model and has been really impressively hidden into the design with the screw caps looking like part of it. They do tend to go loose sometimes through posing it, but I have found that unscrewing and rescrewing them simply by twisting them returns them to being taut and stable. I want to take a minute just drawing attention to what really works about this as an interpretation of the movie version. The bear head I think is one crucial piece that needs to look right. It's noticeably different from the TV series version, and you can forgive what's wrong around the black space because that expression of that head centerpiece seems so correct. Similarly, above that, the crane head is supreme. This was another statement change to the TV series version and works so well, both as a cockpit and here in the design of it. We must give some credit to the articulation and posability present here. What a range. It really feels like a Zap Megazord in that regard. There's plenty of options for you to just have fun trying out different poses. The Power Sword is cool to have too, even if it seems mostly to be the show version, which is fair, as the Fox CGI design team seemed to be using the toy version as inspiration anyway, as it didn't form a saber of fire on the film. Though again, this is something that looks really chromed in the movie and just a little bit metallic and matte here. Perhaps that could be a good way into any potential chrome repainting. While I've pointed out some of the bigger glaring contrasts from the on-screen design, let's not reduce how incredible the details are here. The base of the Megazord feet being an unlikely sculpt which in retrospect works because of how much this thing is supposed to be seen flying. There's so much moulded detail that really pushes the design medium forward. It's not just a bootleg with a few familiar parts, This thing has all that sculpt, which adds to the realistic feel of it. Even where it's wrong, being so carefully crafted gives it this feeling of still being worthwhile. It's quite the illusion. It really feels great to finally be able to represent all three theatrical Megazords, this, Turbo, and Dino 2017. They're all a bit cursed in one way or another. I guess less so the Turbo one, which is a total outlier because it's the only film one unaltered from the Sentai original, and instead of CGI generated, they actually constructed it as a suit and as miniature scale Zords for their movie and actually made a great transformation sequence out of it. But 2017, as we've mentioned, suffers from the same CGI wishing stone as 1995, creating a Megazord that is too difficult to realise as a combining toy that still remains screen accurate. So yeah, they're a funny trio, as are the three versions that I have of this Megazord: the plus size original, the sleek but not without issue Legacy, and now the 90s futuristic skinny movie tall guy. To wrap up my thoughts on this one though, this one, as I've said, has always been a major missing piece for me, a holy grail and something that's existed more in my imagination than anywhere else physically. What Fardonne 3D has done is allow those of us that did appreciate this thing to be able to finally add it to our display shelves, and in a way that doesn't feel too out of place beside its TV show counterparts, even if maybe it is a bit bigger. So what do you guys think of the movie Ninja Falcon Megazord? Will you be getting one of your own? And also, what do you think of the look of this video? Patreon have been getting 4K HDR videos for a while, but this is the first time I'm trying it for the main channel, and so I've recorded it as fancily as I could. Do let me know in the comments then, and of course, until the next time, see you later.